The first thing people notice about my beach house is the silence. Not the ocean, not the white porch swing, not the weathered cedar siding that had survived 4 hurricanes before I ever signed the papers. The silence. The kind that settles into your bones after years of chaos. My name is Claire Anderson. I'm 36 years old, and every board in that little beach house was paid for by me. No inheritance, no family money, no lucky break. Just 15 years of 60-hour work weeks, missed birthdays, skipped vacations, and enough overtime to forget what weekends even felt like. The house wasn't luxurious. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a tiny kitchen with old blue cabinets, a porch facing the Atlantic. But when I held those keys for the first time, I wasn't buying property, I was buying peace. For the first time in my life, nobody else had a claim on it. Or so I believed. I arrived on a Friday afternoon. The movers had barely left before I carried my favorite chair onto the porch. I remember sitting there with coffee growing cold in my hands while waves rolled lazily toward the shore. No traffic, no sirens, no neighbors arguing through apartment walls. Just wind, salt, and breathing. I hadn't realized how exhausted I'd become until nobody needed anything from me. For almost 2 decades I'd been the dependable daughter. The responsible one. If my younger brother Jason forgot rent, I paid it. If Dad needed help fixing the roof, I drove 3 hours. If Mom wanted someone to organize Thanksgiving, she never asked. She simply announced that I was doing it. Everyone assumed I'd say yes, and I always did, because saying no felt selfish. People often ask when my parents became entitled. They assume something dramatic happened. A big fight. Some terrible betrayal. The truth is much smaller than that. Entitlement grows quietly. Like mold behind a wall. Every time you sacrifice your comfort to avoid conflict, it spreads. Every time you apologize for setting a boundary, it spreads. Every time someone discovers you'll clean up the mess they created, it spreads. By the time you finally notice it, the whole house is infected. Looking back, there were hundreds of moments I ignored. When I graduated college, my parents borrowed half the money I'd saved for furniture because Jason had gotten into debt again. I never saw it back. When I received my first promotion, Mom announced to relatives that I would start helping with their mortgage. She never asked. She simply volunteered me. When I protested, she looked genuinely confused. But you're doing well. As though success automatically meant I belonged to everyone else. Eventually I stopped arguing. It was easier. Or at least I thought it was. Buying the beach house changed something inside me. For the first time, I wanted a life that belonged only to me. I planted flowers, hung family photos that actually made me smile, painted 1 bedroom into a reading room, bought bookshelves instead of another guest bed. Every decision whispered the same sentence. This is yours. Not theirs, yours. That feeling lasted exactly 22 hours. Saturday evening my phone rang. Mom? I almost ignored it almost. Instead I answered. Hi Mom. She skipped the greeting. We'll be there Monday. I frowned. Where? Your beach house. I laughed because surely she was joking. She wasn't. Jason rented the moving truck. Something inside my stomach tightened. What moving truck? The one bringing our furniture. I stood so quickly my coffee spilled across the porch floor. Mom, what are you talking about? She sighed dramatically. The house, Claire? Was sold ours. We're moving in with you. As though we were discussing the weather. I waited. Surely she'd realize how insane that sounded. Instead she continued. Your father needs fresh air. I've always wanted to live near the ocean. You have extra bedrooms? It just makes sense. Every sentence made my pulse climb higher. You never asked me. Silence. Then the 4 words I'd heard my entire life. Family helps family. Family sacrifices. Family shares. Family doesn't keep score. Funny how those rules always applied in one direction. I'm serious, I said. You can't just move into my house? Another pause. Then she laughed, not kindly, patiently. Like explaining something obvious to a child. Claire, you're single. It's just 1 little house. What do you need all that space for? I stared across the ocean. My hands had begun shaking. I said no. Her voice changed instantly. Cold sharp. If you don't like it, you can stay somewhere else. I couldn't even answer. She had just told me to leave my own house. The one whose mortgage I'd signed. The one she'd never contributed a dollar toward. Before I could respond, she hung up. I remained frozen on the porch for nearly 10 minutes. The waves kept coming. Birds kept flying. The world behaved as though nothing had changed. But everything had, because my mother hadn't sounded hopeful. She hadn't sounded desperate. She'd sounded certain. Certain people don't gamble. Certain people believe they already know the answer. That frightened me more than anything she'd said. I called Jason. He answered immediately. Hey, you rented a moving truck, a pause. So she told you. Told me what? He exhaled. We've all talked about it. We all. The family. Our cousins, Aunt Melissa, Grandpa. Everybody knows Mom and Dad are moving to your place. My heartbeat stopped. What exactly do they know? That you invited them. I nearly dropped the phone. I never invited anyone. Silence. Then, Mom said you did. After we ended the call, I sat at my kitchen table until midnight, not crying, not angry, thinking. Because something about this felt wrong. Parents don't usually sell their house before asking where they're going to live. Normal people don't rent moving trucks based on assumptions. They plan. They prepare. They know. Unless someone convinced them they already had permission. Or someone lied. The next morning my phone buzzed. It wasn't my mother, it was my aunt. Claire, she said warmly. I'm so proud of you. For what? Taking your parents in. You've always had the biggest heart. I closed my eyes. The lie had already spread. Not yesterday. Not overnight. Weeks ago. Maybe months. And suddenly, I understood something terrifying. This wasn't an impulsive decision. It was a carefully built story. One I'd never even known existed. I didn't sleep much that night. Not because I was afraid. Because I was finally seeing my family without the excuses I'd spent years making for them. The beach house was quiet, but my mind wasn't. I replayed every conversation from the last 6 months. Every unanswered text, every awkward holiday. Every moment my mother had insisted, we'll talk later. There had never been a later. She'd already been making decisions without me. Now I knew why. Sunday morning arrived with bright sunshine and a calm ocean. Normally I'd have taken my coffee onto the porch. Instead, I opened my laptop. If my mother had convinced everyone I invited them to move in, there had to be evidence somewhere. Family group chats, messages, photos, something. I wasn't looking for revenge. I was looking for the truth. Those are two very different things. My family had one enormous group chat. 32 people, cousins, aunts, uncles, family friends who somehow became honorary relatives over the years. I had muted it months ago. There were 68 unread messages. I began scrolling. The first message that mattered had been posted almost 7 weeks earlier. Mom had written, "Wonderful news! Claire wants us to enjoy retirement with her by the beach." We finally said yes. Underneath were dozens of heart emojis. Congratulations, what a wonderful daughter. God bless Claire, you're so lucky. Nobody questioned it. Why would they? My mother had always been the family storyteller. People believed her automatically. A week later she'd posted another update. This time, it was a photograph. My porch. The blue shutters, the exact photo from the real estate listing I'd sent only one person, my father. The caption read, "Our beautiful new home by the ocean." Our, not Claire's. Not, the place we'll be staying. Our home. Comments flooded beneath it. When can we visit? The grandchildren will love it. Claire is an angel. Retirement looks good on you. Every comment tightened something inside my chest, because every single person believed a story that never happened. Then I found the message that changed everything. It wasn't from my mother. It was from my cousin Emily. She'd shared a real estate listing. My parents' house, the house I'd grown up in. Across the front photo was a bright red banner. Sold. Below it Emily had written, "Congratulations, Uncle Mark and Aunt Susan! Beach life starts now!" My coffee went cold beside me. They hadn't planned to sell. They already had. The sale had closed 4 days earlier. My parents no longer owned a house. They'd burned the bridge behind them. Without ever asking if another bridge existed, I leaned back in my chair. Until that moment, part of me had believed this was desperation. 2 aging parents making a terrible decision. Now I understood. It wasn't desperation. It was confidence. They believed they had already won. I called Dad. He answered on the second ring. His voice sounded tired. "Morning, Dad. Did you sell the house?" A long silence. "Yes." "When?" "Thursday." I closed my eyes. So before Mom called me, another silence. "Yes." "Did you know I never agreed to this?" I heard him breathe, long, heavy. Your father can learn a great deal from silence. Sometimes, it's the only honest answer he has. Finally he spoke. "Your mother said you offered." "I never did." "I know." Those 2 words nearly broke my heart. "You know I know now?" He sounded older than I'd ever heard him. "I should have asked you myself." "You should have." I thought. He stopped. "What?" "I thought your mother had already talked to you." "She hadn't." "I know." Another long pause. "I've made a lot of mistakes, Claire." That was the closest my father had ever come to an apology. "Why sell before asking?" His answer came quietly. "Because the buyer gave us 48 hours. So Mom decided for everyone. Less. You another pause. Yes. After we hung up, I wasn't angry with Dad anymore. Disappointed, absolutely. But not angry. My father wasn't driving the train. He'd simply spent 40 years riding in the passenger seat. Around noon, Jason called.
I'm sure you did.
She's upset. I imagine she is.
You don't understand. I laughed. No. Jason, I understand perfectly. They have nowhere to go. That's not my fault. There are parents. And? You have room? I have ownership? Silence. Then, you've changed. For years, those words would have crushed me instead. I smiled. I hope so. He didn't know what to say. Neither did I. Eventually he muttered, don't embarrass Mom tomorrow. Tomorrow. Monday. Moving day. Everything had already been scheduled. The truck. The furniture. The relatives stopping by to welcome everyone. Even the neighborhood had probably heard. Mom loved an audience. She always had. That afternoon, I drove into town. Not because I was running away. Because I wanted answers. The attorney who handled my closing happened to have her office only 15 minutes away. Her name was Rebecca Collins. She remembered me immediately. Claire, what brings you back so soon? I smiled weakly. You wouldn't believe me if I told you. Try me. 20 minutes later she had. Rebecca listened without interrupting. No raised eyebrows. No dramatic reactions. Just careful attention. When I finished, she folded her hands. The house belongs to you. I know. No one can simply claim it. I know. If someone enters without permission. She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. Then she said something I wasn't expecting. Do you want to be right? I blinked. Or do you want this to end? What do you mean? Because those aren't always the same thing. I thought about that for a long moment. Finally, I want the truth. Rebecca smiled. Then don't fight with your mother. What? Let her tell her story. I frowned. Why? Because lies collapse under their own weight. She opened a drawer and handed me a fresh certified copy of my deed. Then another document, a letter confirming sole ownership. Everything official. Everything undeniable. Facts, she said. Not emotions. Driving home, her words stayed with me. Facts, not emotions. My mother expected an argument. She expected yelling, crying, guilt. She'd spent 30 years winning those battles. What she had never faced was someone who simply refused to play. Back at the beach house, I made exactly 4 phone calls. The first. To my Aunt Linda. Would you all like to come by tomorrow around noon?
Oh, we'd love to.
Oh, perfect. The second. To Cousin Emily. I'm finally having everyone over. She sounded excited. I'll bring dessert. The third. To my next-door neighbor Mr. Howard. A retired judge. One of the kindest men I'd ever met. If things get uncomfortable tomorrow, would you mind stopping by? He didn't ask questions. Of course. The fourth. I'd like every lock checked. They were changed after closing. I know. I just want to be certain. He smiled. They're solid. Good. That evening, I cleaned the house, not because guests were coming. Because I wanted everything exactly where I chose to leave it. I arranged fresh flowers on the dining table, placed coffee mugs beside the machine, opened every curtain. Sunlight would fill every room. There would be no shadows tomorrow, no secrets, just truth. As the sun disappeared behind the ocean, I carried my chair back onto the porch. The same chair where I'd dreamed about peace less than 2 days earlier. Oddly, I still felt peaceful. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't trying to save everyone else. I was protecting something I'd earned. Around 9 that night, my phone buzzed. One message. From Mom. See you tomorrow. Jason rented the bigger truck. We have more furniture than expected. No question. No apology. No hesitation. Just certainty. I looked out across the dark water. Then quietly locked my front door. I checked every window. Placed the deed inside a simple folder on the kitchen counter. Turned off the lights. And went to bed. Because tomorrow, the moving truck would arrive. And for the first time in 36 years, my mother was going to discover something she'd never expected. Her daughter had finally learned the difference between kindness and surrender. Monday arrived wrapped in a golden sunrise. The ocean looked impossibly calm. If someone had driven past my little beach house that morning, they would have thought it was just another peaceful day on the Carolina coast. Fresh coffee brewed in the kitchen. Blue hydrangeas sat in a vase on the dining table. Soft jazz played from a small speaker near the window. Nothing looked unusual, exactly the way I wanted it. Because when chaos walks through your front door, calm becomes its greatest enemy. At 11:30, the first guests arrived. Aunt Linda carried a homemade lemon cake. Emily brought fruit salad. My cousins Mark and Sophie arrived together with 2 folding chairs. laughing about how hard it had been to find parking near the beach. Everyone looked excited. No one looked suspicious. They believed they were attending a happy family celebration. In a way, they were. Just not the celebration they expected. "Claire," Aunt Linda said as she hugged me. "This place is beautiful." "Thank you. You've done so well for yourself. I've been lucky." "No," she smiled. "You've worked hard." Her words stayed with me. Worked hard. It was amazing how rarely anyone in my family acknowledged that. The house slowly filled with conversation. People admired the ocean view, complimented the blue cabinets, talked about retirement, vacation plans, Christmas by the beach. I poured coffee, refilled cups, listened more than I spoke. Every minute that passed made one thing clearer. No one here had malicious intentions. They had simply trusted the wrong storyteller. At exactly 11:58, I heard it. The low growl of a diesel engine. It grew louder until gravel crackled beneath heavy tires. Conversation stopped. Every head turned toward the front window. The moving truck had arrived. Behind it rolled my father's old sedan. The truck parked first, then the car. For several seconds, no one moved. The driver's side door opened. Jason climbed down wearing work gloves and a baseball cap. He stretched, smiled confidently, and walked toward the back of the truck. Then my mother stepped out of the passenger side. She looked like someone arriving at a vacation home she'd owned for years. Cream-colored pants, pearl earrings, perfect hair. She didn't glance at the house with curiosity. She inspected it with ownership. Dad emerged last. His shoulders seemed lower than I'd ever seen them. He looked toward the porch, saw the relatives, then saw me. Our eyes met for only a second. He looked away. Mom climbed the porch steps with a broad smile. "There everyone is." She kissed Aunt Linda, hugged Emily, shook hands with Mark. "I knew you'd all come." She turned toward me. Without asking, she reached for a hug. I stepped back politely. Her smile flickered, only for a heartbeat. Then it returned. "Well," she announced loudly, "finally made it." Everyone smiled awkwardly. No one quite knew what to say. Mom mistook their silence for agreement. "Perfect." She walked through the front door without waiting for an invitation. Immediately she began pointing. "The sofa should go over there. Our bedroom gets the morning sun. The dining table won't fit unless we move Claire's bookshelf. Our bedroom. Claire's bookshelf. Not your bookshelf." Already, she spoke as though ownership had transferred. Jason opened the truck. Furniture filled it from floor to ceiling. Beds, dressers, boxes labeled Smastarberom, Keiki Aingiargom Garage, everything from an entire lifetime. They hadn't packed for a visit. They'd packed for permanence. "Jason," Mom called, "bring the bedroom furniture first." He grabbed a box, started toward the porch. I quietly stepped into the doorway. He stopped. "Don't bring anything inside." "He funny." "I'm serious." Mom sighed dramatically. "Oh Claire, must we do this in front of everyone?" I looked around the room. "Actually, I think this is exactly where we should do it." Silence. The kind that makes every small sound feel enormous. Even the waves outside seemed quieter. Mom folded her arms. "What are you talking about?" I spoke calmly. "I'd like you to explain something." "What?" "You've told everyone here that I invited you to live with me." "I did." "When exactly did that conversation happen?" She blinked. "What month?" Another pause. "You know perfectly well." "I don't." "Claire, what month?" No answer. The relatives exchanged confused glances. Emily frowned. Mark looked toward Jason. Even Aunt Linda seemed uncertain. Mom tried changing the subject. "This is ridiculous." "No." I replied softly. "It really isn't." I walked to the kitchen, opened a drawer, removed a simple manila folder, placed it on the dining table. No dramatic movement. No slamming, just facts. Inside lay 2 documents, the deed and the attorney's certification of ownership. I turned them so everyone could read. "My name appears here." I pointed. "Only mine." No one spoke. "This house belongs to me," I continued. "I purchased it 6 weeks ago. I never offered it to anyone. I never agreed to share ownership. I never invited anyone to move in." Every sentence landed quietly, like stones sinking beneath still water. Mom's expression hardened. "You're really doing this?" "I'm telling the truth." "You promised." "I never did." "You've forgotten." "I haven't." She looked around the room searching for support. Instead, she found uncertainty. Emily finally spoke. "Aunt Susan. When Claire supposedly invited you." "I don't remember hearing it from Claire." Mom answered immediately. "She told us privately." I smiled gently. "Then perhaps you can tell everyone exactly where." Silence. Again. Longer this time. Jason jumped in. "Does it matter?" "Yes," I answered. "It matters because everyone here was told I made a promise." "I didn't." Mom's voice rose. "We sold our house. I know. Because we believed you." "No," I said quietly. You sold your house because you believed a story you created. Her cheeks turned bright red. After everything we've done for you. I almost smiled, not because it was funny. Because I'd expected those exact words. She wasn't speaking to me anymore, she was performing. The audience simply wasn't applauding. Dad finally stood, his voice barely rose above a whisper. Suzanne. She ignored him. He tried again. Susan, nothing. Then, for the first time in my life, my father raised his voice. Enough. The room froze. Even Mom looked startled. Dad turned toward everyone gathered inside. His hands trembled. I need to say something. No one interrupted. Claire never invited us. The words seemed to echo through the room. I didn't. That's my fault. He looked directly at me. I'm sorry. Mom stared at him in disbelief. What are you doing? He answered without looking at her. Stopping the lie. Jason set the box he'd been carrying back onto the truck, slowly, carefully, as though it had suddenly become much heavier. Mom's confidence disappeared. Not all at once, little by little. Like sand washing away beneath the tide. She looked around the room one last time, searching, begging, expecting someone, anyone to defend her. No one did. Not because they hated her, because the truth had finally entered the room. And once truth arrives, performance becomes very difficult. I stepped aside from the doorway, not inviting them in, simply making something clear. This house has room for kindness, I said. But it doesn't have room for lies. No one spoke. Outside, the ocean continued its steady rhythm. Inside, my family's story had changed forever. For a long moment, no one moved. The only sound inside the house was the faint ticking of the old clock above the fireplace. Outside, waves rolled onto the shore exactly as they had yesterday. The ocean didn't care about family arguments. It never had. My mother stood in the middle of my living room, staring at the deed lying on the table as though enough anger could make my name disappear from it. It couldn't. Facts don't change because someone dislikes them. Jason finally broke the silence. What now? No one answered. He looked from my mother to my father, then at the moving truck, then back to me. For the first time since he'd arrived, he looked nervous. Not embarrassed. Nervous. As though there was something else he hadn't told anyone. Dad slowly walked toward the porch. He looked older than he had just 48 hours earlier. I think, he said quietly, we need to leave. Mom spun toward him. Liv, you can't be serious. Where exactly are we supposed to go? Dad looked at the truck. I don't know. But we aren't staying here. You've always been weak. Mom snapped. You always quit. Dad didn't answer immediately. Instead, he looked at me. I'm sorry, Claire. I should have protected you years ago. You shouldn't have had to protect us from ourselves. Those words hurt far more than the shouting had, because they were true. Then something unexpected happened. Aunt Linda stood up. She walked over to my mother. Susan, we've been sisters for 60 years. But you lied. Mom opened her mouth. Linda gently raised her hand. No. You don't get to explain. You told all of us Claire invited you. She didn't. You let us believe she wanted this. She never said those words. One by one, the others quietly nodded, not angrily, sadly. Emily stepped closer. Aunt Susan. I already called everyone this morning. They were excited for you. What am I supposed to tell them now? Mom didn't answer, because there wasn't an answer, not one that could erase weeks of deception. Jason suddenly spoke again. I need to say something. Everyone turned toward him. He rubbed the back of his neck. I knew. The room froze. I knew Claire never agreed. My mother stared at him. What? I heard you leave her a voicemail 3 weeks ago. You never got an answer? So, I knew. You lied too, Emily whispered. Jason nodded. I didn't stop Mom. Because, he swallowed hard, I thought, if they lived here, I could move into their old place. No one said a word. He had finally admitted it. The hidden motive behind all of it. This had never been only about retirement. It had been about convenience. Everyone wanted a better life, using mine. Mom looked at Jason in disbelief. You promised you wouldn't say anything. The sentence escaped before she could stop it. Every face in the room changed, because now, there was nothing left to debate. It hadn't been confusion, it had been a plan. For the first time all day, I felt strangely calm. Not victorious, not angry, just finished. I looked around the room, at the relatives, at the truck, at my father, then finally at my mother. I love you, I said quietly. She looked surprised. But love isn't permission. I can love you and still refuse to surrender the life I worked 15 years to build. I can help you without giving away my home. She didn't answer. Maybe she couldn't. I reached into the kitchen drawer. Everyone watched. Instead of another document, I pulled out a folder. Inside were apartment listings, senior communities, rental homes, phone numbers, contact names. I placed them on the table. I spent yesterday afternoon finding places within your budget. Dad looked at them. Mom didn't. I'll pay for 2 months of rent. I continued. I'll help move your furniture. I'll even help unpack. But, I rested my hand gently on the deed. This house isn't part of the solution. It never will be. No one could accuse me of abandoning them, because I wasn't. I was simply refusing to become their retirement plan. There is a difference. A very important one. Dad quietly picked up the folder. His eyes watered. Thank you. Mom still refused to look at me. She stared out the window toward the ocean. I never thought you'd choose a house over your family, she whispered. I smiled. I didn't. I chose healthy boundaries. If you see those as choosing a house, then maybe we've been defining family differently all these years. The moving truck left an hour later. No shouting, no police, no dramatic scene, just boxes loaded back inside, furniture secured again. Jason closed the truck door. Dad climbed into the passenger seat. Before getting in, he looked back. He raised one hand, a silent goodbye. Or perhaps a silent apology. Then they drove away. The relatives stayed another hour, not because they wanted gossip, because they wanted understanding. One by one, they apologized, not for anything they had done, for believing something they had never bothered to verify. I told them the truth. It's okay. We all trusted the wrong story. Over the following weeks, life slowly settled. Mom and Dad rented a modest apartment 20 minutes from their old neighborhood. Jason found steady work at a shipping company, not because I forced him, because for the first time, there was no one left to rescue him. 3 months later, Dad visited alone. He brought homemade apple pie. We sat on the porch watching the waves. After a long silence, he smiled. You know, I used to think peace came from avoiding conflict. He looked toward the ocean. I was wrong. It comes from finally telling the truth. I smiled. So does freedom. Mom didn't visit for almost a year. When she finally did, she knocked, she waited. She didn't assume. That simple knock meant more than any apology could have. Because it told me she'd finally understood something. A home isn't entered because you're related. It's entered because you're invited. Today, the blue cabinets are still there. The porch swing still creaks every evening. The hydrangeas have grown taller than the railing. Sometimes family visits. Sometimes they don't. But every person who walks through my front door now does the same thing first. They knock. And every time I hear that gentle sound, I'm reminded that respect doesn't begin with love. It begins with recognizing that another person's life belongs to them, and perhaps that was the welcome my parents never expected. Not revenge, not humiliation, just a daughter who finally understood that protecting her peace wasn't selfish. It was necessary. Thank you for staying with us until the very end. If Claire's story reminded you that kindness should never come at the cost of your peace, then let us know in the comments. What would you have done if you were in her place? Your stories, opinions, and experiences are what make this community so powerful, and we'd love to read every one of them. If you enjoyed this story, please hit the like button, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss another unforgettable family drama. Welcome to the Family Conspiracy, where hidden lies are uncovered, family secrets come to light, and ordinary people find the courage to stand up for themselves. Every week, we bring you gripping stories of betrayal, resilience, justice, and unexpected twists that prove the truth always has a way of finding the light. Share this video with someone who needs a reminder that setting boundaries isn't selfish. It's self-respect. Until next time, take care of yourself, protect your peace, and remember, the strongest families aren't built on control. They're built on honesty, respect, and trust. Thanks for watching The Family Conspiracy. We'll see you in the next story.